Good afternoon, Don McKinnon. In the good old days, Patricia Riley will be with us in May. During the month of April, Patricia is a candidate. She's chairman of the school committee, and she's a candidate. And so she chooses not to appear on cable during the month of April because it would be somewhat of a, some people might say it's a conflict, but that's just a matter of opinion. Our guest this afternoon is Deacon John Welch. I think Deacon John and I go back more than a couple of years, maybe
Long time.
maybe 40 years, something like that.
Something like 40 years.
It's around there, around 40 years. We always tell the story. We were down at Johnson's Pond. There was ice. In those days, you could go on the ice and not go under the ice. And we met each other there probably for the first time, pushing our little darlings about.
Yep.
And here we are now, 40, 50 years later.
And we're still
And we're still here, and we're still here, we're still here. And Deacon John, though, was at one time, and I did kid him a little bit at one time, because John was the type of guy, when he got into something, he got into it 100% or 110%. And then all of a sudden he was on to something else for 110%. And so when he went, and he was at one time chairman of the Conservation Commission.
correct.
And so he was on conservation. And so then he got off of conservation. And one time he was the sealer of weights and measures. He got off of sealer of weights and measures. And so he decided to go in and to take a calling, which is holy orders, and became a deacon. And I said, now you've done it. I said, you're not going anywhere. You don't resign from holy orders.
No.
And so here he is. How long was it a deacon before you retired, John?
How long was I a deacon?
Until you retired?
Yeah, I
20 years or 10? Or,
was 19 at St. Anne's,
yeah.
and we got to be 75. You have to turn in a letter of resignation.
That's right.
But I'm still active at St.
That's what I mean. Yeah. I mean, the bishop retired, Coleman,
Yeah.
and he is, and you and I both are Colemans back historically.
We just
So
found out.
he may have bragging rights that he's related to you and I, if he's
I'll have
lucky.
to mention it to him next time.
I
see
do
him.
every time, he forgets, but you mention it to him, well, you're a deacon, he'll probably remember that. But he's retired, and yet he was there during confirmation, confirming
Yeah.
the youths of Raynham. So even what I said to you, holy orders is forever. And
yeah.
so therefore, when you retired at 75, you didn't retire as most people understand retirement, because you still had the calling,
Oh,
you're still the deacon, and you went on, you worked for maybe a little bit for hospice, maybe a little bit for,
Yeah, I was a chaplain for Guardian Hospice, for a couple of hospice
yeah.
clubs, outfits, and I really enjoyed that work. But they got reconsolidated or whatever you call
On
it.
more corporate. My wife was with hospice. Her sister passed many years ago, and hospice was very good to her sisters. So she's worked for years for hospice. But now they've not, I'm sure they're fine, but they've gone more corporate
Yeah.
than they were,
Yeah.
which was more or less amateurs, which volunteer, and then they're going a little more like a corporation or a business than they
Yeah,
used
it's
to
a
be,
business
which
now.
is fine.
It's
which is
all right.
fine.
They're
Yeah.
still doing the work. Which is,
They are. And they have a home that was funny on the, I always made fun of it because that's my nature, Mitt Romney's son lives in one of these very exclusive towns, which he would. He's a millionaire, and he should live in an exclusive town. But anyway, they wanted to put what they call a hospice house in his neighborhood. And he went to the Board of Selectmen and protested because he said it would affect his real estate value.
Oh.
And there might be ambulances, and heaven forbid, a hearse, going by his house. And he thought that it would be, and they tried to paint him as a regular guy, but the day he did that, he lost a little bit of regular guyism in my world. So once in a while I bring that up. As a matter of fact, he was successful. it was not built there. It was built in another town. My friend in Woburn, his brother spent some time in a hospice house. Basically, the hospice operates, as you say, still does wonderful work. If a person has a limited period of time and they're living alone, then the hospice house is there for them. So it's a very good organization. The other thing you volunteered for, and you were there for quite a while, was the Whaling Museum in New Bedford.
I was a docent. We called, people say, what's a docent? Well, a docent is an educated guide. Before you can become a docent at the Whaling Museum, you have to take a 10-week course on the physiology of the whale.
Let me think, they pay a lot of money. Oh, wait a minute, they pay nothing.
Oh, it's paying nothing. Yeah.
you got a mileage and everything else that's going on.
Yeah,
and if you're late, they get upset. You know what I mean? It's like you're in a military academy, yeah.
Take an hour to get there, and then you couldn't find a parking space.
I know. I went down there. You gave me a tour. It's a great museum.
Oh, wonderful museum.
Yeah. But I use the word carefully because, I do use words. They're a little bit ingrates in a fashion because people are besting their butt for them, and they almost think they're employees, and they're not employees.
Yeah,
they're volunteers.
They have 75 volunteers.
Wow. And you spent months preparing for that.
Yeah, well, I don't know how long it was, 10 weeks or something.
10 weeks is over a month.
Yeah.
That's over a month. So anyway, and then John volunteered on the Conservation Commission. I'll give you one quick story, which I always tell when John's around in a show like this, is that when John was chairman on Conservation, of course, he got to meet a lot of people, and one was a little lady named Mrs. Gamache. Mm-hmm. And she was just the most wonderful little lady you could ever meet. And she owned a piece of property. She owned a house, another house, and then a piece of property. And but she's going to keep that property forever. And somehow or other, you became a salesman or a person that gave her the quality of donating lands. I guess she made $1 or $2 on it, but not much.
Not much, no.
No, it wasn't market value. And when I went to talk to her one day, she said to me, if it wasn't for Johnny Welch, I'd still own that piece of land. She said, so John talked her into...
In a nice way, yeah.
Oh, definitely. She loved you still when I saw her. And now for those who are saying, where is that piece of land? You be patient, I will tell you. There is an anchor on that. It is called the anchor site. Then now they have a little accommodation for a cooked picnic or something if people choose. And so that's the anchor site. Next to it was Mr. Littleton's piece of property, which has the stone which designates the Leonard Iron Works. So the anchor site, which you got for the town, you did it. And Mr. Littleton, when he passed, donated the property at no charge to the town of Raynham with the boulder that states that it's the site of the original Leonard. For those who are new to the town of Raynham's bragging rights is that we were the first successful ironworks in the country. Yeah. Prior to that, there were ironworks, 1 or 2, but they all failed. Ours lasted for
200 years.
200 years is successful. Not many businesses go, except for Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. It goes 200 years, and they haven't even gone 200 years. No. So that's one, and so that's that. And anyway, you'd say, well, all of that is good, but and you're also. I'll give you one more before we get into the other. You're also a certified storyteller.
Yeah, master storyteller.
Master storyteller. How you had to take courses for that also?
I did.
See, yes. I do a lot of these things, but I'm lazy. I said to you one time, I'd like to tell stories, and you said, well, you got to take some courses. And I said, oh, I didn't. I just like to tell stories. I don't feel, but you had to take courses to do that.
I did, yeah. It's a 3-year intensive training in storytelling.
That's amazing.
I tell local, based on my own experience.
Yeah.
I don't tell ghost stories or some of the folk tales. I don't tell those.
Right.
I tell my own stories. And
But see, you've spent, was it, how many years to be a deacon? Was it 4?
5.
5 years to be a deacon, 3 years to be a storyteller, another 10 weeks to be, you've spent more time in the classroom
Yeah.
after you,
Yeah,
you know,
I don't have a master's degree in storytelling,
Yeah.
but I am a master
storyteller. Yeah, because of that.
Yeah.
And you have a couple of mentors, and you do tell stories from time to time.
Oh, sure. I go to schools and, you know, like church groups and
Right. Oh, I've been to a
social
couple of them. Yeah.
clubs and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and so that's something which we might even have a CD, a DVD on that.
Oh, I do have a
Yeah.
CD that I made, 2004 I made
Yeah,
that.
and I got one of those.
And then I studied with J. O'Callahan, who lives in Marshfield, but he's a world traveler. He goes to China and Australia and telling stories.
Yeah, yeah.
He's has composed a story about the NASA, the International Space
Right,
thing.
sure.
They contacted him because NASA is 50 years old this year.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so they had him
Tell.
develop a story about
Oh.
NASA.
Wow.
It's called Forged in the Stars, and it's a story about NASA.
Does
and
he
the-
tell it to people in that
he tells
area?
It, well, he told it at the White House, and
Yeah,
he told it at
yeah.
the Space Center, and he
Wow.
tells it around different colleges and things like that.
And the guy I used to remember early on was the national guy, Harrison.
Oh, Garrison Keillor.
Garrison Keillor.
Yeah, he's on Prairie Home Companion.
Yeah.
And
He's national.
Oh, sure. I say to people, you ever hear Prairie Home Companion? Oh, no, never heard it. Saturday night, 8 to 10 or 8, 6 to 8 o'clock at night.
For probably 40 years now.
Yeah, it's on every Saturday night.
Yeah. yeah.
Oh, you can hear it.
And he travels about. He's been to Boston.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Sure.
But he travels all over the country in a big bus, with the-
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's on Saturday nights and Sunday noontime on WGBH.
And he tells stories.
Yeah, well, he
That's
has
part of what he does. He's
he
like
has
an
a-
Arthur Godfrey. That's one of the things he does.
he has a variety show,
Hmm.
and he'll have tap dances on the radio
Yeah.
program, and different musicians and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
But he also has a story that he tells about how things were in his hometown, Lake Wobegon, he calls it.
Now, is that a fictitious town that
Yeah,
he's made up?
yeah.
Yeah.
I tell a story about Main Street, USA, and it's
Yeah.
about Taunton. How Main Street was 60 years ago. The store
Pierce
is-
Hardware, was it?
Oh, Pierce Hardware and Kresge's Five and Dime. And,
The store that stays on is St. Pierre.
the
Shoe store.
Yeah.
For some
But
reason, it stays
60
on.
years ago was Dean Brothers Shoe Store.
Oh, I think I taught with a young man named Dean, and I think he was related to that
Well,
family.
could be.
He lived up on 44, up near the Thayers. And
Oh, that was that was the guy that was the radio, Dean Brothers Radio.
oh, okay.
They used to be on 44.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So I want you to do now. I'll tell people in a minute. We haven't told them why you're here yet, so that's none of their business. But I would like you to tell the one story you told the other day. Every once in a while, we get together. Every once in a while, John will share one of his stories with us. And, of course, the one that led up to it is, I will never forget, early on, this isn't one of your stories, but early on, you were drafted, and you were going to go in the service, and we're going to send you over to Korea, and I take liberty, so I probably am following up your story, but that's what I do. And you sat down with uncles and people like that and said, you can get killed over there. And they said, Johnny, the odds of you going to the front lines, do you realize only 5% out of all the people in the service go to the front line? And you told me, and I thought of that when I had my rifle, and the truck was going up to the front line. He said, and you said, and I'm sitting there with the rifle there, and I said, oh, evidently those uncles didn't realize I was a 5%er, so that's what you were. But for that, and I'm going to ask you to tell, it's a short story, but if you would, tell us the story of when you were ready to go home, and you were all packed up, and you got there's one word you can't use on it, but if you can, I think we can, whatever. But tell the story, if you will, of what happened at that time. You're ready to go, and suddenly there's something, notification.
Well, I had my orders in my hand, and I got a notification to go see the first sergeant. He was the guy in charge of everything.
The last guy you wanted to see.
Yeah, I was ready to go the next day. And,
Yeah. So you're ready to go
2 days.
home, and you
Yeah.
got this notification.
I got this notification, and I go down, and I said, what's this? And he says, well, you've got to go before courts and boards 0800 tomorrow morning. I said, what's that?
Yeah.
He said, well, either you're going to be a court-martial
Yeah.
or you're going to be a witness in the court-martial.
Yeah.
I said, how long will that take?
Yeah.
Oh, it could take 6 hours, could take 60 days.
And you're ready to go
I
home.
said, I can. I got my thing to
Yeah,
go.
sure you do.
He says, you're not going anywhere till this is straightened out. So anyway, do you want me to tell the whole story?
Well, yeah, because you tell me who was there when you got in, the
So
different
anyway,
types of,
I got shipped over to courts and boards, and I got out of the Jeep, and the MP come over to me, and he said, you stand over there. So I go over there to stand. He says, stand with those men over there. So I go over there, and they're all chained together.
except you. They're all chained.
And they're, you know, the bank robbers and rapists and murderers. And
That's what they call it, the chain gang.
yeah, so anyway, they call me in, and they call my name out,
Yeah.
present, and I go up and stand in front of the tribunal, 3 officers there. And anyway, we'll read the charge. So I said, okay. Did you, on or about the 25th of December, 1953, receive from your aunt a package containing a sewing kit?
They're in there for rape, murder, and mayhem.
I said, well,
And
yeah,
did you get
yeah.
a sewing kit?
I said, yes, I did. And he said, well, for cripe's sake,
Yeah.
will you send her a thank you card because she's suing the government for loss of a valuable package. And that's a true story. Here we are. We were worried about the North Koreans dropping atom
A
bombs.
war is going on. Bombs are flying about. Murderers and rapists are chained together, and Johnny Welsh is down at the end being called in. And did you receive a sewing kit?
From my aunt.
And so you guaranteed them that you would send her a note.
Oh, yeah.
And
I
let
had to.
let her know.
I guess I had to write the note out right there if I wanted to go home.
Question, I was wondering, we never heard that part of the story. Did you ever use the sewing kit? Do you remember?
Probably not.
Probably not. Oh, my goodness, wow. Well, that to me is the type of story that John Welsh tells. And,
Yeah.
and those are things which, more or less, there's a tagline to it, is when you're saying, what is this man could be court-martialed, he could be X number of days or months. And so that's a great story, John. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
The reason John Welsh is here today, I'm going to ask that the DVD, all of these DVDs are for the Historical Society, or the Historical Commission, I guess we'd say, maybe either one of the two. And these tapes on the good old days, and some of them are, those were the good old days, and others are, these are the good old days. So we had Kathleen Roberts, who's 100, and Molly Caron, who was 17. And so there was those were and these are. And so right now, I'm going to go into something which people had a debate several months ago, if not a year ago. And what it was Pat Riley and I were talking, and I brought up the fact that Alan Chaka was the fella who obtained the Borden colony. And it got some people upset that it was Alan Chalker, you know. But people will understand if you think about it. I never said he was the person that initiated the Borden colony. He wasn't the Raynhamite who went to the House or the Senate and said we want it. But, however, I'll take to my grave the fact that Alan Chalker was the guy who pushed it through the House and Senate and got the governor to sign it. Anyone who doesn't understand the complexities, all you've got to do is try someday to put a bill through, and you will find the reality of it all. My granddaughter's been trying for 2 years on a concussion bill, and it's maybe, you know, going to surface, we hope. When will it? When do these bills ever get through? And so it's difficult to get a bill through. And what happened is, as well-meaning as those people were, and I think early on when you came on board was a fellow named John Ames. Now, John Ames, you want to tell people who John Ames was?
Well, he was a state rep,
but he was
a member of the Ames family.
From Easton.
Shovels.
The Oliver Ames, Shovels, and world known.
Yeah, well, Stonehill College is the original estate.
Donated by the Ames family. The school is called Oliver Ames High School, and this was John Ames. I remember I called one day and his wife answered, and I said, "Can I speak to John?" She said, "He's out mowing the lawn." I said, "Please, don't tell me that an Ames is out mowing the lawn." But that's where he was. He was a very good, regular, everyday guy.
Yeah.
And the other person that by the way, well, I tend to put myself off the subject. I apologize to you and your family. The reason that John's here today is that prior to Alan Chalker being a rep, as a matter of fact, when John got started, Alan...
He was in kindergarten.
He probably, yeah. He was in, as were some of the people that were complaining were in kindergarten. Now, but John Welsh was appointed by the selectmen to represent the Conservation Commission because he had an idea. There was a farm in the town of Raynham that was affiliated with the Taunton State Hospital, and it was where they grew produce and things for all of the state hospitals. So it was very successful. And called today, now everybody's saying it right now. You're all saying it out there, aren't you? Borden Colony, the Borden Colony. And Deacon John is the young man at that, you were young at that time, John.
I was.
You remember those, well, maybe you don't, but anyway, you were young. And you went younger than you are now. And you went to the selectmen because you were chairman of the Conservation Commission. And I will eventually get myself off the subject again because I tend to do this. Because after I get through saying this and you get through saying that, I've got a list of people I'll ask you for information. These were people that were served on the Conservation Commission when you were chairman. But Johnny went to the selectmen and was appointed by the selectmen to be the go-to guy to get from the Commonwealth of Mass Borden Colony. Now, at that time, this is the way people think about many things you can think about today. You'll never get it. It's never going to happen. But it isn't going to happen unless you start it. And John Welsh, the reason that this is a historical tape, and I will ask this DVD with Alan Chalker to be set aside on the Borden Colony, I will have certain things that are on all the tapes, are kept for the Historical Commission. But there will be certain tapes. Do we call them not tape? We call them DVDs. They will be DVDs that are set aside in the historical library.
CDs, I think it called.
CDs?
Yeah. Compact discs. I think.
He knows he's technical too. But we will have a separate section of Borden Colony and different things in the town of Raynham that occurred. I would like to do that, and I will do that because that's also my nature. And Johnny went to, and I mentioned John Ames because John Ames was I don't mean a short-term rep, but I will say he was rep for maybe 2, definitely not more than 3 terms.
Oh, I don't think so.
Because he succeeded a gentleman from Raynham who was one of our founding people,
Oh,
I
sure.
call.
O'Brien.
Named Walter O'Brien was the rep. And Walter retired. He was never defeated, Walter O'Brien. And the territory at that, the district at that time was Raynham, Easton,
Easton, yeah.
and a little bit of Mansfield. I think Mansfield was a little bit in
I
there.
don't remember now.
I don't think Taunton was at that time. So that, it swung around a little bit here and there. So Ames ran from Easton. And what occurred was that he went to a gentleman named John Parker, who was legendary. John Parker was one of the most legendary senators in our history. He served for a couple of decades. He had been mayor of the city. He welcomed Franklin Delano Roosevelt right down to Bob Hope, and he knew them all. And you went to him. I'm not so sure it wasn't John Parker who had this written up, because Alan Chalker has never maintained that he wrote the contract. Who wrote the contract, we don't know. I should check with David Flynn. Maybe he would know.
Yeah.
Do you know? Because I think it might have been Johnny Parker, or he had one of his aides write it. But you went to them at that time,
Yeah.
and you started the ball rolling.
I'd like to go back to where the idea came from,
Yes, please. That's why you're here, John.
because I was down on Main Street. They used to have these crazy day sales. Every once in a while, all the stores would put stuff up on Main Street. I'm walking along, looking at this stuff, and Arthur Pillsbury came along,
A legendary
who
person.
was on the Board of Selectmen at the time.
Yep.
And he said, "Hey, Johnny, do you know what I hear? I hear the state is going to sell the Board and Colony. Wouldn't that be a nice thing to get for the town?"
Mm.
And that's what started
And
it.
that was it, Arthur Pillsbury.
And so I said, "I wonder who I should contact about that." And he said, "Well, I guess Senator Parker." So I went to Clarkie's News, on
Sure, yeah,
Broadway.
yeah.
And I said, "I got to contact the Senator Parker. How do I do that?" One of the fellows there says, "Oh, you want to get a hold of Johnny Parker? Call him at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's the only time you can get him." Okay. So I called him up at 6 o'clock in the morning. This is John Welch from Raynham. I'd like to speak to the senator. His wife says, "John, telephone." And I know he was rolling over in bed.
Yeah.
"Yeah, who's this?" "John Welch from Raynham." "Oh, Johnny, how are you? What can I do for you?" And that's how
And that was
it
John
started.
Parker. See, he was also knowledgeable in your name, your family name,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
your dad, John Welch's father, was the judge. In those days, in the 40s, the judge was one person, and that was he didn't rotate around. Everybody knew his name, and they did.
Well, the reason Parker knew my father was my father ran for mayor in 1936, I think, 38, somewhere around there. Hey, he didn't get elected
Of the city of Taunton.
for the city of Taunton, and Parker was just a kid at the time, worked for him. And
Parker worked for your dad.
yeah, and they he was friends ever since.
Yeah.
Parker worked for the Gazette at the time. He was
That's
a
right.
linotype operator,
That's
which they
right.
don't have anymore.
No, but
And that's how the friendship started. And so when I said Johnny Welch from Raynham,
Right away.
he knew who it was.
was your dad John too? Were you John?
Yeah, he was.
okay.
He was John.
So
Eden.
when he heard John, but when he heard John Welch,
yeah.
he was set.
And so anyway, that's how it started.
Well, I'm going to ask you if you will come back in a couple of weeks, if you can. We'll check your schedule. My people will talk to your people.
Oh,
Does that sound good? Are you impressed? And
Yeah.
we'll see if we can get together, and because we touched just the surface because of your various careers into the Board and Colony. And if you think you could make it in a couple of weeks, and maybe we'll get together, unless you're out of town.
Call me. I'll look at my schedule.
Yeah, well, you'll check the thing, and maybe it's McKenna and tell him I'm not here. Thank you very much, John Welch, for being with us, and we'll get more into the Board and Colony as usual. McKenna got off the mark. Thank you.
Welcome.